The monitors flatlined for 3 seconds. In the operating room of Walter Reed Medical Center, Dr. Marcus Chen's hands never trembled, but today was different. The patient on the table wasn't just any soldier. He was General Harrison, a decorated war hero fighting for his life. As Marcus made the first incision, he had no idea that the general would soon discover scars on the young surgeon's arms that would rewrite both their stories. The emergency call had come in at 0600 hours. A convoy hit by an improvised explosive device 20 miles outside Kandahar. 3 wounded, 1 critical. General Harrison, age 52, multiple shrapnel wounds to the chest and abdomen, possible internal bleeding. ETA, 4 minutes. Doctor. Marcus Chen was already scrubbed and ready when the ambulance doors burst open. At 28, he looked more like a resident than the chief trauma surgeon he'd become in record time. His black hair was always perfectly combed, his surgical scrubs immaculate, and his demeanor so comet-bordered on stoic. The nursing staff had nicknamed him the Quiet Storm. Not because he was loud, but because his presence in the OR was both peaceful and intensely powerful. "What do we have?" Marcus asked as the paramedics wheeled in the stretcher. 4-star General Thomas Harrison, age 52, multiple penetrating wounds from an IED blast. BP dropping, possible internal hemorrhaging. He's been conscious but fading fast. Marcus's eyes immediately went to work, scanning the patient with the practiced efficiency that had saved hundreds of lives. General Harrison was a large man, built like the career soldier he was, but now he looked fragile against the white sheets. His dress uniform had been cut away, revealing a chest marked with fresh wounds and old scars from previous conflicts. "Get him 2 or 3, Marcus ordered, his voice carrying the quiet authority that made seasoned nurses twice his age follow without question. "Call for 2 units of O-negative, and get Dr. Rodriguez in here for cardiac support." As they prepped the general for surgery, Marcus noticed something that made him pause for just a fraction of a second. General Harrison's eyes were open, alert despite his condition, and they were studying Marcus with an intensity that seemed out of place for someone fighting for his life. "Doctor," the general whispered, his voice barely audible above the machines. "You look young." It wasn't the first time Marcus had heard that observation, and it wouldn't be the last. At every hospital where he'd worked, the same comments followed him. Too young, too quiet. How did someone so inexperienced become a trauma surgeon so fast? The questions never bothered him anymore, but today, looking into General Harrison's experienced eyes, something felt different. "Age is just a number, General," Marcus replied softly as they wheeled him into the operating room. "Let's focus on getting you home to your family." The general's eyes never left Marcus's face. "Have we met before, son?" Marcus shook his head as the anesthesiologist began preparing the general for surgery. "No, sir, but we're going to know each other very well over the next few hours." The operating room at Walter Reed was state-of-the-art, equipped with the latest technology for treating combat injuries. Marcus had performed over 200 trauma surgeries in this room, but he approached each one with the same methodical precision that had earned him his reputation. What his colleagues didn't know was where he'd learned that precision, or why his hands never shook, even when facing the most critical cases. "Okay, people," Marcus announced as General Harrison was positioned on the table. "We have multiple penetrating wounds, possible damage to the liver and spleen. This is going to be a long one, so let's stay focused." As the anesthesia took effect, General Harrison's eyes fluttered closed, but not before Marcus caught something in his expression. A look of recognition, though they'd never met before. The first incision was always the most crucial. Marcus made his cut with the steady confidence of a surgeon who'd performed this procedure countless times under conditions most doctors couldn't imagine. His hands moved with an efficiency that seemed almost mechanical, but there was an artistry to his work that even the most experienced surgical nurses admired. "Suction," Marcus called out, his voice steady as he worked to control the bleeding. "I can see the source. Shrapnel fragment, approximately 2 centimeters, lodged near the hepatic artery." Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, the cardiac surgeon, watched Marcus work with fascination. She'd been practicing for 15 years, but she'd never seen anyone move with such calm precision under pressure. There was something almost military about his approach, efficient, methodical, and completely focused on the mission at hand. "Where did you train?" she asked quietly as Marcus carefully extracted the first piece of shrapnel. "Johns Hopkins," Marcus replied without looking up from his work. "But I learned the important stuff somewhere else." It was a typical Marcus answer, truthful but incomplete. Everyone at Walter Reed knew he'd graduated top of his class from medical school, completed his residency in record time, and somehow accumulated more trauma surgery experience than doctors twice his age. But nobody knew where he'd gotten that experience, or why he seemed to understand combat injuries better than surgeons who'd been working at military hospitals for decades. The surgery continued for 3 hours. Marcus removed 7 pieces of shrapnel, repaired damage to the liver and spleen, and stabilized internal bleeding that could have been fatal. Throughout the procedure, his hands never trembled, his voice never wavered, and his focus never shifted from the patient on the table. It was during the final stages of the surgery that it happened. Marcus was suturing the last incision when his surgical gown sleeve rode up slightly, exposing his left forearm. Dr. Rodriguez was the first to notice, her eyes widening as she caught sight of what looked like old surgical scars running along Marcus's arm. But these weren't the neat, precise lines of elective surgery. These were jagged, irregular, the kind of scars that came from emergency field surgery performed under combat conditions. "Marcus," she whispered, but he was too focused on his work to notice her stare. General Harrison began to stir as the anesthesia wore off. His eyes opened slowly, the fog of medication gradually clearing as he became aware of his surroundings. The surgery had been successful. He could feel the tight pull of sutures, the dull ache of healing, but he was alive. Marcus was checking his vital signs when the general's eyes focused on him clearly for the first time since the surgery. "How do you feel, General?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying the same calm professionalism he showed all his patients. General Harrison studied Marcus's face for a long moment before answering. "Like I've been hit by a truck," he said with a weak smile. "But alive, thanks to you. Just doing my job, sir." "Your job," the general repeated, his experienced eyes taking in Marcus's youthful appearance once again. "Tell me, doctor, how long have you been practicing surgery?" "Officially? 3 years since I completed my residency." "Officially," General Harrison caught the word choice. "And unofficially?" Marcus hesitated for the first time since the general had arrived at the hospital. It was a small pause, barely noticeable, but General Harrison had spent his career reading people, and he didn't miss it. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir." General Harrison shifted slightly in his bed, wincing at the movement, but keeping his eyes fixed on Marcus. "Son, I've been in the military for 30 years. I've seen field medics work under fire, and I've seen trauma surgeons work in the comfort of stateside hospitals. Your hands moved like someone who's done emergency surgery in the back of a Humvee with mortars falling around them." The comment hung in the air between them. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something subtle shifted in his posture. A straightening that was almost imperceptible, but unmistakably military. "I've had good training," Marcus said carefully. "That wasn't training I saw in that operating room." General Harrison pressed gently. "That was experience. The kind of experience that comes from doing this work when lives depend on it, and there's no room for error." Before Marcus could respond, Dr. Rodriguez knocked and entered the recovery room. She'd been thinking about what she'd seen during the surgery, and the questions that had been building in her mind finally pushed her to seek answers. "Marcus," she said, "I need to ask you something." Both men turned to her, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "During the surgery, I saw scars on your arm. They looked like combat injuries. Old ones." Marcus's calm facade cracked slightly. His hand instinctively moved to his left forearm, covering the area where his sleeve had risen during the procedure. General Harrison's eyes sharpened. "Show me." It wasn't a request. Despite being the patient, General Harrison's command presence filled the room. Marcus looked from the general to Dr. Rodriguez, realizing that his carefully maintained privacy was about to come to an end. Slowly, Marcus rolled up his left sleeve. The scars were immediately visible, a network of thin, irregular lines running along his forearm. But these weren't random marks. To anyone with military medical experience, they told a very specific story. "Field surgery," General Harrison said quietly. "Someone operated on you under combat conditions. No anesthesia, probably in the back of a transport vehicle or a field hospital under fire." Marcus nodded slowly. "When?" the general asked. "Afghanistan. 3 years ago. You were deployed." Marcus hesitated, then rolled up his right sleeve as well. More scars, these ones forming a pattern that Dr. Rodriguez recognized immediately. "You weren't a patient," she breathed. "You were the surgeon. Those are scars from doing surgery while under fire. The angle, the positioning, they're from shrapnel hitting you while you were operating on someone else." The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of General Harrison's monitors. "You were a combat medic," General Harrison stated. It wasn't a question. "Army Special Forces medic," Marcus confirmed, his voice barely above a whisper. 18 Delta. 2 tours in Afghanistan. The revelation changed everything in the room. Dr. Rodriguez looked at Marcus with new understanding, while General Harrison's expression shifted to something approaching awe. "Special Forces medics are trained to perform surgery under conditions that would break most doctors," General Harrison said slowly. "They save lives when there's no backup, no safety net, and no room for failure." Marcus nodded. "I lost 3 soldiers on my first tour because I wasn't skilled enough. When I came back, I decided I needed to become a real surgeon, not just someone with advanced first aid training." "So you went to medical school," Dr. Rodriguez said, pieces falling into place. "Johns Hopkins offered me a full scholarship for veterans. The Army paid for my medical education in exchange for my commitment to work at military hospitals like this one." General Harrison was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "How many soldiers did you save over there?" "I don't keep count." "I do," the general said firmly. "Every soldier saved is someone's son, daughter, husband, wife." "How many?" Marcus met his eyes. 43 confirmed saves during combat operations. "But I lost 12. The weight of those numbers settled over the room. 12 lives lost, 43 saved. All while Marcus was barely out of his teens and operating under conditions that would challenge the most experienced surgeons. "The scars on your arms," General Harrison said gently. "Tell me about them." Marcus looked down at his forearms, the memories clearly written in the network of old wounds. "Most of them are from one day," he said quietly. "August 15th, 2019. Our convoy was hit by a coordinated attack. 3 vehicles, 12 wounded, 2 critical. I was working on the most seriously injured soldier when mortars started falling. Shrapnel was coming down like rain, but I couldn't stop. He would have died." "So you kept operating while under fire," Dr. Rodriguez said. "For 6 hours. Every time I thought we were clear, another attack would start. I took shrapnel in both arms, my back, my leg. But I kept working because that soldier had a wife and 2 kids back home." "Did he make it?" General Harrison asked. Marcus smiled for the first time since the conversation began. "Sergeant Rodriguez, no relation." He glanced at Dr. Rodriguez with a slight grin. "He made a full recovery. He's teaching high school now in Texas." General Harrison was quiet for several minutes, studying Marcus with the intense gaze of someone reassessing everything they thought they knew. "How old are you?" he asked finally. 28. "And you've been through Special Forces training, 2 combat tours, medical school, residency, and now you're chief of trauma surgery at one of the country's premier military hospitals." "Yes, sir. That's not possible in a normal timeline." Marcus's expression grew more serious. "Nothing about my path has been normal, General. I graduated high school at 16, enlisted immediately, went through SF training, deployed at 19. When I came back, I was fast-tracked through college and medical school. The Army needed experienced combat surgeons, and I needed to become good enough that I'd never lose another soldier to my inexperience." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. A nurse entered with medication for General Harrison, but her presence reminded them that this was still a hospital, not a debriefing room. After she left, General Harrison spoke again, his voice carrying a different tone, not the curiosity of earlier, but something deeper. "Son, I've served with some of the finest soldiers this country has ever produced. I've seen Medal of Honor recipients, Navy SEALs, Rangers, Marines who've done things that most people couldn't imagine. But what you've done, saving lives under fire, then dedicating your life to making sure you could save more, that's a different kind of heroism." Marcus shook his head. "I'm not a hero, General. I just do my job." "That's exactly what every hero says," Dr. Rodriguez interjected. "Marcus, do you realize that everyone in this hospital thinks you're some kind of prodigy who just naturally understood trauma surgery? Nobody knew you learned it by doing it under the worst possible conditions." "I prefer it that way," Marcus said. "People don't need to know about my past to trust my abilities." General Harrison studied him for another moment before speaking. "Doctor, I have a question that might sound strange." "Yes, sir?" "When you were operating on me today, did you think about those soldiers you saved in Afghanistan?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think about them every time I operate. Every patient reminds me that someone's life is in my hands, and that someone somewhere is praying for them to come home. And the ones you lost, Marcus's expression grew distant. I think about them too. They remind me why I can't afford to make mistakes. The room grew quiet again, the weight of shared understanding settling between the three medical professionals. Dr. Rodriguez was the first to break the silence. Marcus, why didn't you ever tell us? I mean, your colleagues, your team. We had no idea what you'd been through. Because it doesn't matter, Marcus replied. What matters is that I do good work and patients go home to their families. My past doesn't heal people, my skills do. General Harrison shifted in his bed, wincing slightly but managing a smile. Son, you're wrong about that. Your past absolutely matters, because it's what gave you those skills. Every soldier you saved in Afghanistan prepared you to save lives here at home. Every scar on your arms represents a lesson that makes you better at what you do. The general's right, Dr. Rodriguez added. Marcus, you're not just a surgeon, you're a combat surgeon. There's a difference, and it shows in everything you do. The way you stay calm under pressure, the way you make decisions quickly, the way you never give up on a patient. That all comes from your experience as a Special Forces medic. Marcus looked uncomfortable with the praise, but something in General Harrison's expression suggested the conversation wasn't over. Dr. Chen, the general said formally. I have one more question. Yes, sir? Are you planning to stay in the army? Marcus nodded. I have 6 more years on my commitment. After that, I'm not sure. General Harrison was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. Son, I want you to know that what happened here today, not just the surgery, but this conversation, it's going to change things. What do you mean? I mean that there are people in the Pentagon who need to know that we have surgeons like you. Combat veterans who understand what it's like to save lives under fire and have dedicated themselves to saving more lives in peacetime. Marcus looked uncertain. General, I just want to do my job. And you will. But your job might be bigger than you think. Over the next few days, as General Harrison recovered from his surgery, word began to spread through Walter Reed about Dr. Marcus Chen's background. Not in the form of gossip or rumor, but as a quiet acknowledgement of respect. Nurses who had questioned his youth began to understand his competence. Doctors who had wondered about his experience began to see him differently. But the most significant change came from General Harrison himself. On the day before his discharge, the general asked to speak with Marcus privately. Doctor, I've made some calls. Marcus entered the room, looking as professionally calm as always. How are you feeling, sir? Like a man who owes his life to someone special, General Harrison replied. Sit down, son. Marcus took a chair next to the bed. I've spoken with some people at the Pentagon about you. Sir, I hope you know that wasn't necessary. General Harrison held up a hand. Let me finish. I told them about a young surgeon who learned his craft saving soldiers under fire, who came home and dedicated his life to becoming the best trauma surgeon he could be, and who operates on every patient like their life depends on absolute perfection. Marcus remained quiet, uncertain where this was leading. They want to meet you. Who? The Army Surgeon General, for starters. The Department of Defense is developing new protocols for combat surgery, and they need people who understand both the medical and the military sides of trauma care. Marcus frowned. I'm not interested in leaving patient care for administrative work. General Harrison smiled. Who said anything about leaving patient care? Son, they want to expand your role, not change it. Think about it. How many combat medics are out there, right now doing their best with limited training? How many could be saved if they had training from someone who's been where they are and learned what you've learned? The implications of what the general was suggesting began to sink in. You want me to train other medics? I want you to revolutionize how we train combat surgeons and special forces medics. You have experience that can't be taught from a textbook, experience that could save hundreds of lives. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this possibility. There's something else, General Harrison continued. I've been thinking about what you said, about the soldiers you couldn't save. Marcus's expression grew more serious. Son, every combat medic carries that burden. But what you've done since then, becoming a surgeon, dedicating your life to saving more lives, that's how you honor the ones you couldn't save. I still think about them. Good. That means you're human. But don't let their memory be a burden. Let it be a motivation. Every life you save now, every medic you train, every technique you develop, it's all connected to those 12 soldiers. They're still saving lives through the work you do. The conversation continued for another hour, with General Harrison sharing his vision for how Marcus's unique combination of combat and medical experience could benefit the entire military medical system. When Marcus finally left the general's room that day, he carried with him not just the weight of a new opportunity, but a new understanding of his own journey. The young doctor, who had been dismissed as just a medic by some, who had been questioned for his youth and quiet demeanor by others, was actually something much more valuable. A bridge between the battlefield and the operating room, between the urgency of combat medicine and the precision of surgical training. As he walked through the halls of Walter Reed that evening, Marcus Chen looked the same as he always had: calm, professional, focused on his patients. But inside, something had changed. He was no longer just a surgeon trying to forget his past. He was a doctor ready to use that past to build a better future for every soldier who might one day need emergency surgery under fire. The scars on his arms were no longer reminders of what he'd endured. They were proof of what he'd overcome, and symbols of what he could teach others to overcome as well. General Harrison was right. His past didn't just matter. It was the foundation for everything he would accomplish in the future. And in the operating rooms and training facilities where Marcus would work for years to come, the phrase "just a medic" would take on an entirely new meaning.